Is there anything in the Bible that you yourself have an issue with? Okay, so it took you reading the Bible to realize that those things were bad for you?
Yeah, it actually did. I
Couldn't
didn't
figure this out on your own?
No, Ted Bundy could be redeemed. God doesn't kill children.
What do you think the Passover was? Yahweh sets up a whole system in the Old Testament where you slaughter animals just so he's able to forgive you.
Today's special guest is pastor and author Douglas Brouwer. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Hey, Michael, good to meet you.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. So tell us a little bit about Doug.
I'm a Presbyterian pastor. I have served churches in the U.S. and in Europe. And I just wrote a book. It's my 8th about travel. And it's coming out this week, as a matter of fact. And I'm anxious to talk about it. It's got something to do with the Bible.
Yeah. No. Let's talk about that for sure. So that book that's coming out, your travel book, tell us about it.
So I started out taking long road trips with my family when I was growing up. And my parents gave me, as it turns out, a wonderful gift of curiosity. We went to all 48 states, all over Canada. We saw everything.
Wow.
And as with most children, I thought every family did this. And then only discovered later that my family was unusual in this respect. So when I graduated from high school, my parents said, what would you like for a graduation present? And I think they were thinking I wanted an electric typewriter for college term papers. And instead I said, I want to go to Europe.
Wow.
They shouldn't have been surprised about that, but I have continued to travel throughout my life. And about 2 years ago, I finally sat down to research this, to think it through. Why do people like me set out and go places? What is it that drives us? So that's what the book is about.
Gotcha. And what did you discover as for the drive? What is the drive?
Well, this is not an easy answer. It turned out to be more complicated than I thought, but there's a nature-nurture component. So I obviously had the nurture part. My family demonstrated curiosity about the world. But scientists have also found an adventure gene. And it turns out that about 20% of the population has this adventure gene. I did DNA testing for family tree purposes, and I don't know if they tested for this gene. I have no idea. But scientists have also found that the people who left Africa 50,000 years ago and then spread all over the globe, that they also were driven by this genetic need to explore.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating, just fascinating.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
No, that's good. That's good stuff. Yeah, definitely. There's some of us that choose to explore versus some of us that would just like to find a couch,
Like my sisters.
Explore
I hope they don't watch this, but yes. And then lastly, and this is where we connect, I guess. I think there is a spiritual component to travel. I think I can summarize it very briefly. We can talk about it some more if you want, but I think there's a longing for home. And I think it's a near universal longing, not just Christians, Catholics, and so on. It's a near universal longing to find home.
Find home. Yeah. No, I comfort, safety, security, all that. Absolutely. That's just basic needs, human needs for sure. Awesome. So spiritual component. The spiritual component for you would be the finding home. Is that where we're at with that?
Yeah. Okay, let's dive in.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He uses a German word, Sehnsucht, which he describes as an inconsolable longing in the human heart for we know not what. So there's and St. Augustine, I guess, would call it a restlessness
Hmm.
Most human beings are just simply restless and searching for something. And then, of course, because I come from the tradition I do, uh, I'd give a spiritual name to that. But I think this is a near universal feeling that people have.
Gotcha. And so that wouldn't be connected to a spirit. That would just be natural.
That okay. I mean, either you believe that there's a spiritual dimension to the universe or you don't. I guess that would be the what I would say about that.
Well, I guess I would have to ask, what do you mean by a spiritual dimension?
Yeah, a life beyond this, some consciousness beyond myself.
So my consciousness can go beyond this reality?
Yeah, I think that's what most Christians would say. But then I think people from other religions would also agree with that. Yeah, that
Hmm.
there's a different plane of reality from the one we can see every day.
And why do we believe that there's a different plane of reality?
Well, some of us claim to have experienced it or caught a glimpse of it. I'll I can give you an example. Uh, Sometimes the wonder and awe we experience when we travel is an indicator that there's more than what meets the eye to this
Wonder and
world.
awe are feelings.
Yeah, you could say it that way too.
So why would feelings tell us that there's another world out there?
You know, as I said when we first started down this path, I think either you're open to the idea of a larger reality than the one we know, or you're not. I mean, I think it's that simple. I think I have chosen to believe because
Hmm.
I think I've experienced something larger than myself.
There we go. All right, so let's talk about that experience because I
Okay.
haven't had that experience, so I don't think that there's this extra
Right.
realm out there. I mean, I
Right.
can pretend that there's lots of things, but that doesn't make it real. I mean, my cats are weird. That doesn't mean they're controlled by aliens. I mean, it's just natural. So, how do we get there? How did we get there? What was your experience?
Well, okay. I was raised in a Christian family, so there's no surprise that I've emerged into adulthood with a certain framework of looking at the world. If I had been raised in a Buddhist family in Asia, I think
Hmm.
I would have come into adulthood with a certain framework for thinking about the world.
Hmm.
And and on and on. I mean, there are a number of different family groups around the world with different ways of thinking about
But what was your
the
experience
spiritual
that
realm.
contributed to your belief that there is this spiritual realm? What was your experience with it specifically?
Yeah, I would like to say, and I sense that you're going to be skeptical about this, but I think that I've experienced this often in my life and maybe even regularly.
All right. So how do we decipher spiritual realm and reality? How do we decipher the two?
I think when you talk about the spiritual realm, you're talking about something that is indefinable. And unless you have experienced it and have at least touched it, that it's just not going to make sense to you.
Can we touch it?
Um, Interestingly, there are places around the world that are called liminal places. That they're so the membrane, so to speak, between this world and the next seems especially thin or transparent. And
Sounds like
so,
science fiction to
yes, I
me.
think there are places where we think we can sense the transcendent.
Interesting. So tell me your story. What convinced you? Give me your top one that convinced you that there was a spiritual realm out there.
Uh, One of the biggest ones in my life that propelled me in the direction that I took was this. I was headed earlier in my life to a career in publishing. I worked one summer at a publisher, and I thought, "Oh, this is cool. I think this is me." So I went off to a theological school because all the editors in this publishing company had degrees from good theological schools. I didn't realize when I went there that I would have to work in a church. Who knew to graduate from a theological seminary, you had to work in a church? So I
Yeah.
did. I spent a year working in a church. And then as a result of that year, I thought, I was born for this. This is who I am. I
Hmm.
discovered my true self by being there. So I
Comfortable.
think that
You're
was
comfortable in that
one of the
environment.
major experiences in my life that that set a path for me in life.
Gotcha. So what happened though?
Vocation.
Where's the spiritual part?
See,
I missed
I
it.
understand that doesn't sound spiritual to you. To me, a dramatic life change like that, I'm heading one way, and then suddenly I've got a new career path. I would describe that as a spiritual process.
That
But
happens every
you might
day.
say, "Oh, that
Why
sounds
why are
psychological to me, a
we
feeling." So,
sorry.
okay,
That happens every day. Why are we attributing that to a spirit world when it happens every day? People change
yeah.
their direction in life constantly that don't attribute it to a spiritual world. Like I've done it. I mean, my wife's done it. I mean, my kids, I'm sure they've changed their life in certain ways, different schools, stuff like that. I don't attribute those things, good or bad, to an invisible force.
Yeah.
Why are you attributing it to an invisible force? What has convinced you that that was an invisible force doing that?
I think this is a good question, and uh, I think it's certainly okay to ask. I was given this vocabulary at an early age, so this has
Mm,
become
mm.
the vocabulary of my life. It becomes the way I explain the things that happen to me.
So it's kind of been indoctrinated into you to believe
Well, that's
this.
not a very friendly way of describing it, but
I don't mean any offense by it, but that's essentially what that is. If you're raised as a child to believe something, you're being indoctrinated into that.
right, okay. And if I, as I said, if I had grown up in a Buddhist household or
Exactly. You would have been
right,
indoctrinated into those beliefs.
and the way I would describe it is I would be given a framework for looking at the
Mm,
world, a
mm.
vocabulary for
Yeah.
describing my life.
So let's go back to the beginning then. Why do we believe this framework? Why is this framework your framework? I mean, I grew up with the same framework. It was an evangelical framework, and I took that structure and I tested it, and it fell down pretty easily, like a house of cards. It doesn't handle very well with testing.
Right,
So I changed my structure. I was
right.
indoctrinated, and I was out of it by research and whatnot. So you're telling me that your structure, because of that, that's why you believe that?
Michael, believe me, I have done a fair amount of investigating and interrogating of this worldview that I was given.
Uh-huh.
And what I have today is certainly not the one that I grew up with. I think it's gone through lots of changes.
Gotcha.
Can I
But
can
the
I give you an
structure is still
example?
there. But that structure of belief is still there. It's the Bible, it's the certain God, it's Jesus. That's the structure, right? The just
Right.
the
It
you
happens to
tweak
be
the
the
little
one I
things
grew
in
up with.
between.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. So if you would have taken those experiences without that structure, would you still have applied those to an invisible force?
Possibly. Huh? Uh, I think it is human to wonder where we've come from, and yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a human question.
Human question to wonder. Absolutely. Absolutely. Curious. We're curious. Um, interesting. Interesting. So go
Michael,
ahead. Yeah.
a big section of my book concerns pilgrimage. So in my
Yes.
case,
That's where
I
we're
go
going
somewhere and
next.
I look for
Absolutely.
meaning in the journey. Lots of people take secular pilgrimages.
Hmm.
And they have no religious background. Thinking of the Burning Man
Mm.
in Nevada.
Yeah.
I I think there's no religious dimension to that whatsoever, and yet those are people out there looking for meaning in the experience.
I guarantee you there's people out there that think it's a spiritual experience.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Guaranteed. So that invisible force, I want to, and then your kind of missionary work that you've done in the past. Do you believe that the spiritual force, I don't want to say tells you to do something or forces you to do things, but nudges you towards different decisions, such as the missionary work, such as traveling and spreading the word?
Well, in my case, I think I grew up in a fairly healthy. I grew up with a fairly healthy framework. So the message I was given was that I'm valuable. I'm
Huh.
was created in the image and likeness of God. I'm beloved by God. I mean, so I think I got positive messages about my identity. I think it's possible to grow up in a situation where you get mostly negative uh,
Hmm.
messages about who you really are.
Right.
But I'm grateful for the message that I received about my identity.
And the message did it came from a human, not an invisible force, right?
Yeah, yeah, of
Okay, just
course.
making sure I'm clearing it up. I just want to make sure because the question I asked is do you believe this invisible force tells people to do things or makes things happen so that these things happen, such as your story? Do you believe the invisible force stepped in so that you would go on the right path?
Yeah, I know people talk like that, and I have known people along the way who would describe their lives in that way. I struggle with that.
So how did the
In
invisible force interact with your decision, with your life in that first moment when you went to the theology school and then you started working in the church?
Yeah,
Do you think that was the invisible force that made that happen?
yeah, but I wouldn't describe it as coercive. I would describe it as an unveiling or a revealing. I think I discovered who I really was as a result of that year.
If the invisible force was not around, would you still have gone to that course of actions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my belief system would say probably not, but
So the invisible
I,
force had
I
something to do with it then.
yeah, I think it did. Yeah.
Okay. So this invisible force, can it tell people to do things that are bad, or can it tell them to do things that are going to harm them?
No, I mean,
No.
the the spiritual language that I was given is mostly and almost entirely positive. It gives us positive direction. Uh,
Interesting.
God
So
is
missionaries that are going out to spread the word of God that have been given direction by
yeah,
God and then go out and die as a result,
right.
are they not hearing from God, or are they just confused,
Oh, I don't know
or was God
what sort
telling
of
them to
death you're
go
talking
out?
about. People
And
who are martyred in the course of their work.
does God know when he sends people out to missionary work, does he know the end result?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking a philosophical question that can be answered in a number of ways. What
Well,
does
it's
God's
easy one. Does God
foreknowledge
know
amount
everything?
to?
It's easy, Doug. Does God know everything?
Yeah, I did take a philosophy course in college about this, and God's foreknowledge doesn't determine my life. So God may know everything that's going to happen in my life, but that doesn't mean I'm determined. I think there is a distinction that can be
I think
made.
you're missing the point here, though, Doug. When God sends a missionary to do work, let's go with that guy who was killed by the tribe on that isolated island. He
Right.
swore up and down. He prayed so many times. He swore that God was sending him there. God wanted him to go there. So what I get out of that is either God wanted him to die or he was wrong. Which
Yeah, it's
one is
possible
it?
he was wrong.
So
Uh,
how are we to know then? We've got this devout Christian telling us that God is sending him someplace. This invisible force is talking to him, telling him to do something, and then he dies doing it. Either
Yeah, a lot of Christians have done and continue to do outrageous things in the name of faith. I
hmm,
can't defend that.
this year alone, we've had some die.
Oh, some deaths. Okay.
Missionaries. Yeah, missionaries have died. So on your missionary trips, do you believe that God is sending you on these trips?
So I don't know exactly what you're referring to when you say missionary trips. I have done mission trips around the world, but these
Yeah.
have been um, well, building a nursing school in Haiti.
Matter of fact,
Okay,
there was a couple just killed in Haiti.
right. This would be a
Missionaries.
very problematic time to venture into
Yeah.
Haiti. I get that, but
But
I've
God
been to
sent
Haiti
them.
several
My
times.
point is that God has sent them. This invisible force has sent them there,
Right.
knowing what is going to happen. God does know what's going to happen when he sends people somewhere. Otherwise, you're limiting God in his knowledge, which is weird. Well, I don't understand why you would do that.
I yeah, I guess there's an element of risk when you go into
Oh,
another
100%.
country.
Yeah.
There's political turmoil. I guess there's an element of risk there.
But there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be an element of risk. These are God's people on God's mission. by God. And then when we go to the Bible, the reference for all of this, God's going to protect people. God's going to protect his people. He's going to protect them from all harm. Yahweh will keep you from all harm. Second Thessalonians says that, but the Lord is faithful. He will establish you and guard you against the evil one. I don't see that actually happening when it comes to these travels spreading the word of God.
Yeah, again, you're talking about a particular kind of mission, which I tend to think is
Any of these
problematic.
missions. All these missions, they go out to build hospitals, they go out to build schools, all these churches, all these different things, and they get
Right.
killed. They are slaughtered by people there, the indigenous people or whoever's there, the opposition that doesn't
And
want them there. But
so
God
your
should
reasoning
know.
is, therefore, God should not have sent them.
Yes,
The
that's my
problem
reasoning.
there
My
was
reasoning is
God's
God should
direction.
have, or warned them. Hey, by the way, on such and such time a day, don't be here, because then I will save you. I will protect you from all harm, like I said I would. Otherwise, it's just God being like, hey, go over there. I know you're going to die. I'm not going to tell you about it, but I really want you to go over there and build a church. I
I'm
don't
not
I
sure
don't
that
get
God
it.
micromanages our lives in that way. That's not my experience.
Well, what does this invisible force do then? What is the point of this invisible force? If it doesn't do anything really that's, helpful, what is the point of this invisible force?
The point of this invisible force is to do love and justice around the world, not just here, but in other places
Why do
in
I
the
need
world.
an invisible force to do that, though, Doug? I can do that
You
without
don't.
an invisible force.
I get it that you don't. I,
I don't need it.
right.
I
I
don't
get
need it
it.
to love, to be just. I don't need it. I use my common sense, my rationality, my empathy. Why do I need an invisible force? It's very weird to me, Doug.
I get it. I get that I am weird to you.
Yeah, I don't understand. So why do you need this invisible force? What do you think this invisible force does for you?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think that I was raised to have a certain identity, a sense of myself. God loves me, values me. I am a child of God. So in a way, that determines my life. I am okay. And lots of people wait a lot of years before realizing that they are okay.
Well, it's also okay to not be okay. Um, but I
Okay.
want to go back to why do you think God loves you? You mentioned that a few times. That's your structure there is God
Right.
loves you. Where are you getting this idea from? Has God told you himself?
I think that when the universe came into being, uh, that there was a kind of pleasure that God, the creator, took in creation. And I think that there is a fundamental goodness that God intends for creation. But I mean, clearly, you could point out, you would take the whole rest of the episode here to talk about what's not right about creation. I get that. But I
Right.
think
Yeah, it
the
doesn't
intent
seem
was
very
that we
the
were created to be
intent.
good.
Tell me how the intent was created, or how that intent was created. Did it involve Satan? Did that intent for us to be good involve Satan being created?
I don't know where did Satan come from?
Satan comes from God. God created Satan.
I don't think so.
Who created
Uh,
Satan?
Pardon me?
Well, who created Satan then, if not God?
I don't think I don't think there's a being. I don't think God has any rival beings in the universe.
So you don't believe in Satan, the
I
devil?
didn't say that. I think
Oh, well,
there's evil in the world.
that's so you do believe in Satan.
Yeah, that doesn't do that language doesn't do anything for me.
Okay, help me
Evil is
understand.
real.
What's that? Evil is real, but it's not
Yeah.
an entity.
No, God, I don't think God has any rivals in the universe.
So okay, let's break this down to evil then. Why is there evil in the world? Wouldn't that be a
Ah,
rival to God's perfection?
I think that's why the ancients wrote those early chapters of the Bible so that they could understand where evil came from.
But where do you think evil comes from, Doug?
Well, those early chapters of Genesis inform my understanding. So, evil, according to those early words, evil is a choice that human beings made.
So evil is just a way to describe something, an action. Is that where we're at?
Describe an action. Well, sometimes evil, as we're discovering today, takes on a life of its own. I mean, it becomes infectious. Yeah, I think evil is
That's
very
called
real.
cult-like behavior. That's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
humans are definitely susceptible to cult-like behavior.
yeah, yep.
Unfortunately. So no Satan, just an evil. It's not even. Would it be an evil force? Trying to understand here.
Yeah, I think you like the word force. That word doesn't do very much for me.
Entity? I don't know. How do you want me to say that word? I mean, spirits is weird. I don't. Doesn't make any sense to me. It's
Right.
like ghosts. So we have a
I
ghost world.
I think evil exists. At some point, it started to happen
So it's a
in
being.
in the universe. God didn't create it.
God didn't create it, but God created everything else.
All right. Well, all human beings with choice.
Where do you
Right.
get that idea?
I'm observing human beings.
Where do you get the idea that we all have free choice?
I don't think I said
The
free, but I think we're
well,
we're born or we're born with yeah. We can make lots of choices in life, and often they're not very good choices.
yeah, well, live and learn sometimes. Some of us got to live and learn the hard way. Maybe a couple of times. But so free will, is free will a thing?
I think people are born with enormous freedom. Yes.
Free will. So God does not interfere in people's lives. So we're free from interference. We have free will.
I don't think God micromanages our lives. No.
All right. Well, the Bible, God shows up and micromanages a lot. So why do we not believe that he does it now?
Oh, tell me a story from the Bible where God micromanages a life.
Well, let's start with Cain and Abel. Bring me food. Bring me an offering. Well, that's not a
So,
good enough offering. I don't like that. That's not good enough. Bring me meat. I want blood. I want bloodshed. I want burning meat on the altar. He's micromanaging. He's micromanaging the offerings going to him.
okay,
Then
you're
he
assuming that
micromanages
there
further
was
by
an
giving us 10
historical.
commandments. Then there's 656 somewhat laws. Those are all micromanaging us. I don't understand. Have you read this book?
I have a couple of degrees, Michael.
Good. Come on, man. You know God's micromanaging us then. You've read this thing.
Well, isn't that the religious hierarchy that wrote those laws? I don't think God wrote
So
those
the
laws.
Bible's untrue. Why do we believe the Bible at all if it's just written by somebody else?
Well, who said it was untrue?
You just said that you don't follow that micromanaging stuff because other people wrote it. You just said that.
I said, I don't think God is in the business of micromanaging our lives.
But you believe the Bible to be true.
I believe what, yes, but what does that mean?
Do you believe that these stories are real? Do you believe that God put these laws into effect? Do you believe that God demanded the burning flesh instead of the vegetables? Do you believe these things?
I believe that those laws that we find in Leviticus, let's say, were developed by the Israelite people to manage their life together in the
So when they
wilderness.
say
And
these
then
laws came from God, you don't believe that.
I think it was their best attempt to
Great.
live the life
So
that they
why do
thought
we
God
believe
intended
the
for
rest of
them.
the Bible to be true if we're not going to believe these laws to be true when they are stating they came from God?
Well, we easily let go of the ones we don't like now. You,
That's not
you,
answering the question, Doug.
are you saying that they're eternally true laws? Christians
Where
have
does it
let
say
go of
they
a lot of
where does it say they
Leviticus.
fall off? Where does it say the laws stop being effective?
You want an example?
Jesus says, I know you know this, that not until heaven and earth disappear, not a jot, not a tittle, not the little least bit of the law will disappear. What do you think that means?
I don't think that's a reference to the list of things in Leviticus. No, the
Why do you not
law.
believe that's a list of the laws in Leviticus?
I think we'd have to look at the word in the Hebrew context and see
Uh-huh.
what the Hebrew people thought that word meant. The law.
Okay. And what do you think it means? You went to school, right? You went to school for all this? What do you think it means? You're the professor here. What do you
Well, there
think
is an
he's referring
order.
to in that search in that specific verse? I can speak today. What do you think he's referring to
The jot and tittle.
when he says that not the least bit of the law will disappear? What do you think he's referring to when he says that?
I think you're reading the Bible as though every genre it ought to be interpreted the same. And the Bible has different genres. It has history and prophecy and gospel, and you have to read each one the way it was intended to be read.
Correct. Doug, what do you think it means?
About the jot and tittle.
Yes.
I think that's probably a lyrical way of expressing a deeper truth.
Interesting. Lyrical reference, deeper truth. And
I'm
what
gonna
deeper
send
truth
you-
is he trying to reference
I'm
there?
going to send you a T-shirt with the word "interesting" on it. I think you think a lot of things are interesting.
It's true. It's true. So what's the deeper meaning in this one? What is Jesus trying to tell us that's unclear to me?
Well, I think that God's intention for creation is eternal, is long lasting. Yes, not a, in that sense, the law is not going to pass away until God's intent is carried out.
Which laws, though? Because you just told me those laws don't count because they're written by man.
Yeah. And again, I want to use the Hebrew word here for law, which is which encompasses all the human laws, I guess.
All the laws. Yep. So all the laws that God has put down, all the laws humans have put down, none of it will disappear.
Oh, I don't know about that. As I said, we don't follow some of those rules in Leviticus anymore.
Oh,
The
Doug.
one about tattoos.
Yeah. About mixed fabrics, about killing people that try and distract you to a different religion, or getting slaves from your neighbors. There's so many laws we don't follow. Picking up sticks on Sunday. Hey, I can do that without getting stoned to death now. Isn't that amazing? But Jesus says follow all the laws till the end of the earth. So we should be following all the laws to the end of the earth. I don't understand.
I don't think that's what he meant.
That's what we just. That's okay. That's okay. All right. So, God's love. God's love. Can you help me understand God's love? You say it's there. Where's it coming from? Where is this idea of God's love coming from?
I don't think I'm going to help you understand it. I think, as you say, you've deconstructed that worldview, and that's simply not the way you look at the universe anymore.
I read the Bible. I don't see
I believe
love.
you did.
I don't see love there, Doug. I'm very curious as to where anybody else sees love in the Bible. Help me understand it.
So one of the reasons Jesus is such an important figure in Christian history is that we believe that we can look at him and see a reflection of who God is. We can see a part of. So
I don't
here's
understand.
a person,
I can't look at Jesus. I don't understand. Help me understand that. We
The
can look at
historical
Jesus
figure.
and see God.
Right.
The
So all
stories of
compassion.
Jesus or his ideas?
Ideas too. The way he lived his life.
The way he lived his life. What do you mean the way he lived his life?
I think he moved around and expressed compassion for the people he met. And he sometimes was irritated by them too.
And you see that as a reflection of God.
That's what Christians claim to see when they look at
Doug,
Jesus.
I'm
This is
asking
who
you. I
God
don't care
is.
about anybody else. I want to know what Doug thinks.
Oh, yeah, that's what I think too.
Okay, there we go. All right. So when we go to the Old Testament, we have things such as show no pity, life for life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Do you believe that's something that God said? Even though it says God said it.
Did God say that?
That's what it says. Deuteronomy 19:21. I don't have the exact verse in my face.
Well, please repeat it. I need to hear it again.
Show no pity, life shall be for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot.
And then Jesus comes along and says, "You have heard
Turn the
that
other
it was
cheek."
said, but I say to you."
Mm-hmm.
So
Jesus
he's
says, turn the other
reinterpreting-
cheek. Yahweh says, slaughter, no pity.
Right. So what do you do with that? Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, I say to you."
Right. So you know what that does, Doug? That starts to shake my foundation of belief. That's what that does. It's called a contradiction. And so I have to dive into it and figure out why this contradiction exists. And then when you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the history of the Bible, you realize it was just all written by man and these are just stories. I don't understand the supernatural part. I don't understand the God part. It just, none of this is adding up. You're telling me God is love because Jesus existed and he did nice things, but he also did some crappy things. The fig tree. I love that story. He was hungry. He woke up in the morning hungry. That's how it starts. I love
Yeah.
it. Jesus is hangry. Finds a tree
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
in season. Jesus knows it's not in season. Jesus knows everything. What does he do? Instead of making it grow and fill the whole streets and feeding the village for years on end, Jesus curses the tree and kills it. That's dumb. I mean, if you're going to be a representation of love and awesomeness, and you're going to curse a tree for not having fruit when it's not even supposed to have fruit, that's not a good example. I don't see that
Okay,
as a good
Michael.
example. And if we're
So
going to
my
come,
training says identify the gospel author there. I'm not sure which gospel that occurs in. Is it Luke?
oh, I can't
And
recall off the
then
top of my head, but yeah, go ahead.
yeah, okay. So let's say it's Luke, and then who is
Two
Luke
places.
writing to? At what period is he writing to? How are they going to hear these words? I think that's how you come to an understanding of what's going on there.
Okay, so it's okay Jesus killed the tree because context.
Because of context?
Because there's some kind of context we're missing that we don't know. It's okay that Jesus killed the fig tree. Is that where we're going?
I'm not particularly upset that he killed a fig tree, but what if the deeper truth is that he's a human being and he was hungry at times?
Right, exactly. So he was a flawed human being who lashed out in anger because he was hungry. That's
Well,
my
why?
point, Doug.
Where did the word flawed come from? And
I'm
who
sorry.
says that being angry is
Is
an
lashing out
example
in
of being
anger a
flawed?
sin? Is lashing out in anger a sin, Doug?
I do it. I'm not proud of it, but I do it.
I don't think God likes that, does he? Like lashing out in anger.
But why was I given a
If
full
I
range
lived a
of
life
emotion?
where I lashed out in anger, do you think I'd go to heaven? Lashing out in anger is a sin. Jesus sinned.
Are you convinced that that's true?
That's what the story's telling me. That's where I'm going to go with that. That character sinned.
I I have a full range of emotion from anger to sadness. I believe that these
It's
were
lashing out.
gifts.
Doug, it's the lashing out part. It's the acting out on your anger part that
Right.
makes it the sin.
Right.
That's where
I've
I'm
done
at.
it. I've done it.
Even
Not
thoughts,
proud of
though.
it.
We can go to thoughts because even thinking things, Jesus says, is a sin. If you've thought about lust, you've already committed it. Thought crimes. So, Doug, your anger is just as bad as lashing out if you're thinking it.
Right. If you hate a person, it's the same as murdering. Yep, I get that. Sermon on the Mount.
So Jesus sinned.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's what the story tells us, but good one.
That's okay, man.
It's kind of a gotcha story.
I didn't expect you to follow with that anyways. That's okay. So Jesus' perfection, regardless of that story, you see Jesus as a perfect being, someone we can look up to, correct?
Yeah, but what is perfect? Does that mean he got 800s on the SATs? I don't know what.
I would
how are
assume.
you defining perfect?
Someone we can look up to, a role model.
Yes.
Someone we can look. Okay. So why do you think Jesus is someone we can look up to? Because he said good things like love your neighbor.
Okay, just to give one example, I see in Jesus someone who gave of himself so thoroughly that he ultimately gave his life
Huh?
for what he
okay.
believed in.
Help me understand that. He gave himself. What do you mean he gave of himself? Who did he give himself to?
So, in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night of his arrest, Peter took out a sword and he wanted to fight those guys.
Yeah, cut off the
And
dude's ear.
Jesus said, "No, put your sword away. You know, that's not how we're going to do this." And so he submitted to the authority of the Jews and the authority of Rome. He submitted to the death.
Why though?
Yeah.
1 Timothy 2, 5 through 6. For there is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Jesus Christ, who gave himself as a ransom for all people. This is how this has now been witnessed at the proper time. So a ransom, we can go with a different word there if you like, but how do you feel about that? Jesus is a ransom. Because you said he sacrificed himself, or gave himself. Sorry, he gave himself. Who did he give himself to? The Romans. Why? Why did he have to give himself to the Romans?
Because the alternative was to fight, and he decided not to do that.
He could disappear. He didn't have to fight. That's ridiculous.
Right.
Jesus is magic. He can go, poof, gone. See you later. I'm in heaven again. Poof, I'm over here in Hawaii hanging out. That's his options were not fight or flight. His options were flight. He could have flight or go with them. So Jesus chose to go with them. Why did Jesus have to go with him? What was the reason for Jesus's death?
Well, now how much time do you have to talk about atonement theory?
Well, I think it's kind of a silly idea, sacrificing the innocent to forgive the guilty. So why do you think Jesus's death was a good thing? And who did he have to die for?
Well, let me give you an example from recent history. Did Martin Luther King Jr. have to die? Well, for his people. No, I don't think so. But he gave himself to the cause. He gave himself fully.
Okay.
He lost his life in service to the cause.
Okay.
I think
But Martin Luther King didn't know the end. He probably thought he was going to live through it.
Right. So do I.
Right. Jesus didn't. Jesus knew the reason he was there was because God required the death of the innocent. That's why Jesus was there. Jesus knew that because Jesus is God. They're the same person. They have the same thoughts.
Is that what Orthodox Christian theology teaches? That Jesus had omniscience?
Jesus didn't know the future.
I don't think the Bible tells us that he was omniscient.
Was Jesus God or was Jesus just a man?
I identify him as a person of the Trinity. I do.
Right.
But
So he's a God, right?
So
he's
in
part
his
of the
earthly
Godhead.
form, was he omniscient? I don't think so.
Now that's weird. You've got three figures of the Godhead, and one of them doesn't have omniscience.
Well, not in his earthly form, no.
So he can't transform his earthly form to move it around, to know things, to do things. He can't. So God is limited when he's in an earthly form. But he can
was
heal
sure limited
people.
by his body, yes.
He can break bread and make it, he can do miracles. This isn't I'm not following here, dude. This isn't making sense to me. You're limiting your God.
John 1 verse 1 says there's a logos in the universe, and that logos became flesh. But in becoming flesh, that logos became limited to the human form.
So he limited himself.
Yeah.
But he gave himself powers to heal people. And to make extra fish. And to calm the storms. He had all these powers.
Unlimited power?
Doug, this is not making any sense. This is not making much sense here. But that's okay. That's okay. So regardless if Jesus knew he was going to die and why he was going to die, why do you believe Jesus had to die? Why do you, Doug, believe that Jesus had to die?
I think like many people throughout history, he gave himself utterly to his cause, and that's what I admire about him.
That doesn't make any sense. So he didn't have to die?
I'm not saying what you want me to say, but it does make sense to me.
I just want you to answer the question. Do you think that Jesus was required to die?
I think for our salvation story, yes. That's
there
how
it is.
Works.
Thank you. Now, who required the death of this guy?
Now you're getting into atonement theory, and this is a deeply problematic area. I'll grant you that right at the beginning.
It's all problematic, Doug. All of it's problematic.
You. Yes, I know.
Yes. So, who required the death of Jesus?
So in one branch of Christianity says that God required
Doug, what do you believe?
Angry.
I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I want to know what Doug thinks.
I don't believe in penal substitutionary atonement. Is that what you're driving toward?
So what do you believe? That's what I'm asking you, is what you believe.
I think that Jesus' death was inevitable because of who he was and how he submitted himself in that situation.
So his death was not required.
And yeah, I guess required, inevitable, choose your language.
No, inevitable is different. Required means somebody requires this to happen.
Yeah, but what you want to say, and this is what I'm objecting to, what you want to say is that God demanded his blood because God was so angry with human sin that was the only way he could get beyond human sin. I'm not sure that's the way it works.
Hebrews 9:22, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. How do you take that verse?
I heard it today in church.
How do you take that verse?
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, it's like a seed.
Is that God demanding bloodshed for forgiveness, or is it man writing that?
A seed falls to the ground and dies so that it can find new life as a plant.
That's not forgiveness and killing innocent people because somebody needs forgiveness. Bloodshed, I should say. So
I know where you want to go with that. I think
I just want an answer, Doug. I just want to know what you think. That's it. That's all I want. I don't want to
think
go
that
any specific
atonement is
directions.
a
I just
tough
want to know.
area to talk about in 10 minutes.
Well, it's tough to talk about when we can't answer questions. But I do want to end it with one final area. Thank you, Doug,
Okay.
so much for your answers today. I do appreciate it.
I did
Marriage.
try.
No, no, you did great. You're fine. You're fine. This is I'm knocking over microphones here. I wanted to end it with the marriage thing. How
Uh-oh.
does that work for you when the Bible says you're going to be the bride of Christ? How does that work for you?
Are you talking about the church being the bride of Christ?
Right, the people are the church, right? Not a building, the people. So people, you are part of the church. You would be the bride of Christ. The church, yes, you. How do you take that? How does that work for you? Because I've talked to dudes that are like, yeah, I'm married to Jesus, and that's weird for me. So do you ascribe to that?
Weird for me. It would be weird for me too. I think that's a metaphor. And
Okay,
it's
good.
the best, It's the best we can come up with to describe the relationship between Jesus and the church.
No, that's gross. That's not
It
the
is
best way to
gross.
describe it. There's no physical whatsoever because marriage is physical, and that's not what that is. That's weird.
Right.
That's a weird word. It's very weird. Okay, so
Okay.
thank you for that. I appreciate that. But we are going to close it out here. Any closing comments, and where can we find you at, Doug?
Hey, how about finding me on Substack? It's called Substack.com. You can read even more about my beliefs there.
Mm. Good. Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate your time today. We'll stay in touch.
Good to be with you, Michael.
Thank you. That's all the show there is for you today. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find all things BSW related on the show's website at thebiblesayswhat.com. If you like what you heard and want to help keep the recording light on, simply go to thebiblesayswhat.com and sign up to be a supporter of the show. Your episodic tithes of $1 or more will get you early access to each new episode on Wednesdays instead of Sundays. And no matter which platform you use to listen to your podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next episode. Until then, would you kindly share and review the show?